Okay, last week we just talked about the very basics of a simple rigid body simulation for a destruction. So I'm gonna jump in. I'm gonna make one simple rigid body destruction using, again, a very simple Voronoi fracture, but one by one. I'm gonna make all the nodes by myself without using shelf. So why? Because I'm gonna understand what's happening underlying. So then we move on, and then we make a more complicated ones. Then I just downloaded a animated creature. I'm gonna bring it into the scene and add a kind of like a rigid body simulation to the creature, and just like see how things are going. So the idea is to understanding everything that happens underlying. So I start with just a simple box. Everybody knows about it. Let's call it wall, because I want to turn it into the wall. Many of you might just use the transformation here on the top layer. I don't recommend it. You will realize later on. And you know that I really like to close this and use P on my keyboard when needed. So I've got a nice and neat area to work with. So I jump inside, add tab transform. And I use this transform node to scale it into the shape of a wall. So
with the alembics, is it also a different workflow? You're dealing with an alembic?
So once we get there, you see that how I load an alembic. I just type here instead of like a box an alembic, and I use that to point at the alembic export that I have. But we'll get there. We'll get there in few minutes. So I like to move the pivot down to the base, so like minus 0.5. The pivot is just right attached to the bottom of this box, and I move it up right to the center. So now if I scale it the way I like, it's always on the ground. So let's make a wall. Okay, I'm gonna so that's a simple wall. You remember that how we were fracturing this. So we were using a Voronoi fracture. So this is the classic way, not the RBD material fracture. Actually, RBD material fracture is, let me add an RBD material fracture. It is a Voronoi fracture, but it's a HDA, a Houdini data assets, which is when you double click on it, you see that like somebody has made a crazy amount of like different stuff, and those stuff are actually, many of them are using like a lot of, you see a lot of Voronoi happening here, but let me find it. It takes me a while to find. So, but actually at the heart of it is still Voronoi fracture. So, but Voronoi fracture just because is a simple Voronoi is a simple fracturing algorithm. I use it for now, but we upgrade to the other one. So, this Voronoi fracture needs some points. So you remember that we needed some points. We used scatter, and I scattered some points on the surface, but not that many. So I press P. I make it like, I don't know, 20 points. But these points, if I make it like 1,000, you can see that these points are on the surface, not inside your GO. So that's why, so let me just keep it high because I want to show you. So that's why if I turn the surface into a volume, into a fog, and then scatter some points, my points will be inside. So if I add a ISO offset, which is just a node to convert your geo into a volumetric fog, and then plug that into scatter, you can see that your points are inside as well. So then I just need like 10 points here, and I use them. So your fog could be like, this is like a very it could be like you can add more unified sampling, so it just attaches to the body of the object, not going beyond it. So now you see that like the points are inside your geo. So when I plug that, I have got 20 pieces now. Easy. So again, you remember that how we can manage our scattering. So let's say you want just loads of fracturing here, but just other parts like be large pieces. We used a simple paint. So you can add that paint to your transform here for now. When you add that, you see that these like paint attributes coming up. But actually paint uses we've got this subdivision somewhere, or I should subdivide it. Paint tool actually uses a more complicated surface to paint. Hi Albora, welcome back. So so you will see that if I want to paint, let's say black on the surface, I can't. But when I move to the edge, it just like suddenly paints. So it basically paints points, not the surface. So if you need like to paint your surface properly, you can add a subdivide node in the middle. Subdivide node subdivides your surface. You can subdivide it more, but your surface goes nuts. You need that edge crease, so just override edge crease. So you've got plenty of kind of details. So then when you come to paint it, you can paint the area that you want. You see? So I like to paint reverse. So go to the background. Background is black. I'm gonna say that apply to all. So everything becomes black. Then I go to the foreground and I start to like, let's say my fracture. I want this area to be more fracture. Okay. So if you want to delete, middle click and drag. So middle click paints the background. Anyway, a bit of like sipping, bit of chaos is nice. So you've got black and white. If you pop that into your scatter, you will see like some points are white, some points are black. Let me add some more points, like you see. So in the scatter, you simply can say use density. Density means like the amount of points accumulated in one place, isn't it? So you can say that use density, but there is no density attribute. Actually, we just paint it. So you can say that use color data, CD or color data or color attribute or whatever you want to call it, is a commonly used variable all through Houdini. Just learn it. So you see, oh, we've got our points there. So now these points can be used to fracture my scene, nice and neat. You can move these points, so you can add a transform here and move them where you want. So by moving them, your fracturing moves. You can move some of them. So let's say these are your points, isn't it? Go to the selection of the points and select them and then move the one that you want. So the reason that we pre-fracture, it's like we do visual effects. We just want to create beautiful stuff. We just don't smash things. So even in the natural, so in a real life special effects, they pre-fracture. So let's say they want to fracture this wall. They pre-fracture it because, and then they glue it together. Then ask the actor, now jump. So when the actor jumps and smashes to the wall breaks the way art director and director wants. So you can kind of art direct your fracturing the way you like. Anyway, so you can move things around. You can like adjust it the way you like. So let's say this is what we want. Okay. So we have our fracturing ready. So we constantly observe the amount of data that is traveling through your network. Just middle click here by middle clicking. So I know the number of primitives. I have got 1,000 primitives that they occupy about less than a megabyte of memory. But what is important here is, as well, is these data. Like I am carrying point and name data. I will use them later on, and you see that how I can add data to that those data will travel through my network. So these are a lot of data. So like, I don't want like 1,000 pieces or 1,000 geometry. So then that's why I assemble them. So assemble is a pack. Do you remember that last week we talked about pack geometry? So in assemble node you got this create pack geometry. And what happens, so here you've got 1,700 primitives. Here you got like 100 pieces. These 100 pieces are actually the number of points here. I said fractured into 100 pieces by looking at these points. And now I've got 100 primitives, which is much easier to calculate. You see that it occupies 10 times less than this. This occupies, more than 10. So this occupies 400 kilobytes. This one occupies 80 kilobytes. 5 times less. Anyway. So this one is more manageable. If I press W, I still can see. Okay. So this is going to be my geometry. I can export it out. I can say that I can add a null. You remember that we used to use these nulls to organize and label our networks. So this is gonna be, I like to press Z and I use these kind of round check for output objects. I call that, and I like press C and just make them like dark gray. This is gonna be, I press space bar to add a underscore at the beginning to be able to find it easily when I want to readdress that. This is out geo. Whoa. And okay, so let's fracture it. Let's add dynamics. So I add a dot network. So this dot network, so we are changing the context. Do you remember Houdini? Houdini is interconnected contexts. These contexts, one of them is surface level operators, where you create your surface, where we are now. DOP is dynamic operator level, where we create dynamics, which we want to jump into now. So I create a dynamic operators and I call it like, let's say, wall fracture scene. So here, so you remember that we used to jump in and like load the geo from here to there, but you've got like, you see when I hover on top, it says input 1, input 2, input 3. These inputs can be used. I like to add the output of my geometry to the first input and reuse it inside. So when I go inside, there's nothing. So I start with adding RBD packed object. So this RBD packed object, you can go and find your object, click on this subpath. You see that by this, because of this underscore, this alt is just on top. That's so select it and point it, or here you say that first context geometry. So it means that first input, which is this one. So first input is loaded. Nice and neat. So for a simple dynamic simulation, you remember that we needed gravity, a force. We need a brain to do calculations. So that brain is called solver. Here we need rigid body solver. Okay, so if I play, this should fall, which does. But I want it to fall on a ground. So you can add that ground to your network. So that could come like here after or before gravity or wherever in the network you like. So I add a ground plane and I merge it, tab merge into my simulation. If the order doesn't work well, so it means, so in Houdini, always left affects in the merge node, affects right. You see here, left input affect right. So you can turn it into mutual or swap the place here. I leave it as mutual here, but when we bring the creature later on, you will see that your creature is supposed to affect the ball, not the other way around. So we use that over there. So here I like to always hide this gel because I don't want to see it. Anyway, so now it falls on the floor, but I want to add a ball here and throw that ball, and the moment that the ball hits the wall, it smashes. So I want the wall to be glued together. The process of gluing things together is this. So you need interconnected links between these pieces. How to create those interconnected links, and then use those links and tell this is my glue. So I go to, I export another stream, another branch out of assembly, out of assemble, the last node that we used. Here I add connect adjacent pieces. So this is, what is that one? When I click on that, I see that, oh, there's some lines appearing here. So these like, it says, if I go to the assemble and I make it template, so you see that it will show all the time when I'm working with this one. So when I increase it, you see that these pieces are kind of like, there's some links between them created. This is kind of a loose link because I want this not only to be connected to this, but to other pieces. So I can increase the maximum connection as well. Okay, that's a nice network. Can hold, not too complicated, but not too simple as well. This network is a lot of connections that can hold all the pieces together. So now I add, so I want to create, so like when I middle click on that, I see that I've got my primitives, I got my points here, but I want these interconnected links to be defined as a glue, as a new attribute. I want to generate a new attribute out of my mind, whatever. So you can create attribute all the time. So if you type create, you see that attribute create is the node that you use to create attributes. The attribute that we want to create is this one, is constraint name. How I know that this is the attribute that I want to create? Because here in the simulation, I want right here at the end, I want to create a constraint network. And this constraint network, if I connect it, you see it just gives some error because it needs a glue or any sort of constraint. So there's a lot of constraints here. So you can create soft constraints. Let me type constraints. So you see that there's a bunch of like different type of constraint that you can use for different type of simulations. Soft body, FEM, spring constraint. So I just use a glue constraint here. So inside these spaces, I've got those attributes like constraint name. What is the name of the constraint? And what is the data here? So you see that if I generate that here, the same naming, it will be used later on. So you will see that I use the same technique for activating and deactivating my simulation. Okay, the attribute that I create is this. I create an attribute name. It's going to be on primitives. It's not going to apply on points, on primitives, because these are some edges. These are not points. These are like some lines, isn't it? So they are primitives. It's a string, which is like, it's going to be a name. I call it like wall underscore glue, or whatever you want. So if I middle click here, you see that a new attribute is name is added. Constraint name attribute is generated. Is generated as and is embedded, injected inside your network, and that can be used. So I can add a null here to say that this is gonna be my glue output. So I can use like this kind of like another shape for that. This is gonna be out glue. Okay. So, and I feed it to, let's say, the second input, or I don't know, fourth. Let's keep the fourth input for the glue. I get inside. You remember that I added constraint network here? This constraint network is supposed to point at glue, or say that go and look at your fourth input. So it reads the fourth input, but the glue is not loaded because the data name was wall glue. When I add the right data name, suddenly you see that like the glue network is added. Like, let me just make it wrong. You see, the data is lost, but the right data name goes and find that data name, which was the glue, wall glue that we created, and loads it and uses that as a glue constraint. And this glue constraint has a strength. Like this one is like 10,000. So if I play it, it doesn't break apart. It's strong. But if I make it loose like 0, it's actually as it was. So let's make it 500. Still breaks apart, but you see that some pieces are glued together. It's not that loose, but just like some pieces hold together. So what if this is my desired look, but I don't want it to break. I want it to break when a ball hits the ball. So let's say, let's go up and create that. I'm gonna get inside and make the visibility on here. So when we go up, we see proper wall here. So I go to the top level, sub level surface operator. Here I create a empty geo, or you can simply create a sphere. I call it ball. And I get inside this sphere. I like it to be, so this is a nerves sphere. I make it like a polygon mesh, and I add a transform node, make it smaller, and move it where I want to. Oops. I should be on primitive. Press enter, move it up, and move it like it's gonna hit the wall here. Yeah. So I'm gonna shoot it towards which direction it's gonna go? Z, but minus. I can point it out here. So blue, it's gonna go to this direction, which is blue direction. Blue is Z, but not towards the right direction, but the other way, so which is minus. Okay, so let's export that ball as a, it's a good habit of like always have a nice node structure. Houdini rigid body fracture, we had a project here. I set it there and I save it as here in the scene. I call it wall fracture version 1. Okay, so that's gonna be out ball. I go, so where's my dynamic operators is inside wall here. So go here and load your, oh, I should have packed my ball. Sorry, this ball. This is because that at the moment it has 200, like about 300 primitives, which is a lot. So if I pack it, it's just one object now. So it helps the simulation to be fast. I load it, RBD. And if you don't pack it, you cannot load it as RBD packed object. So that could be like wall, and this is gonna be ball. And how these two are supposed to be joined together. So like, you can merge it. As you remember, we used merge. So we merge these two, and so left, so which is that one on top, will affect the right, which is the ball. So, but where is the ball? I cannot see it because I didn't load it. I go and find it, and I load it in. Okay. So what would happen? Both fall. But you can select the ball, and you see that you've got some initial state, and that velocity is like the speed, the initial speed of the ball. So it's x, y, z. I want to shoot it on the z direction. So if I shoot it on the x direction, like let's say 10, it goes towards me now. But I wanted to shoot it to the z direction, which is that one, but not positive. If I shoot it positive, it goes the other way. I'm gonna shoot it. I'm gonna turn the real time. I'm gonna shoot it to minus, which goes to and hits the wall. But I want the wall to be, to be there, standing there, all the time. So first of all, make the ball. It goes there, and I'm gonna make it really heavy. Density is 1,000. I'm gonna make it 10,000 units. So it's, so you see that the punch is much stronger. But now it comes the time to say that I want this wall to be static. And once the ball hits the wall, it falls apart. How to deactivate? So your rigid body solver has a activate somewhere, or Anyway, it has an activate attribute somewhere. Where is it? That I'm gonna use it. Anyway, it's somewhere. So it's one of these is like activating your activate. Oh, there it is. So like let's say this wall is active, but it could turn into an inactive. But I don't touch it here. I go here and I add a deactivate node here to make it deactivated. So this is how we do it. I add another attribute create here. So here I'm gonna say that okay, I'm gonna make it active. So I'm gonna use the activation attribute anyway. I'm inserting the active attribute right before the final node, the output node. That's gonna be integer, or it's gonna be applied on points, and it's gonna be integer. Like integer is mean like 1, 2, 3 without fractions. And by default it's 1. By default it's active. But now it's 0. But what we can do, we can activate everything. So this is what I do. I say that everything would be activated. So let me go and make it 0 to show you what happens. When I play, nothing would happen. Let me get inside. See, it just has everything has been deactivated, and the wall, the ball hits like kind of a static wall. But here I want to say everything would be active now. So now everything is as it was. But I'm gonna say okay. Now I alt and drag this node, or I copy and Control C, Control V, and paste this node. Let me disconnect that. How to disconnect it? Hold Y, which looks like a scissors, and disconnect that. And say that all was active, and now they become deactive. Somewhere in between, I'm going to say what is supposed to be deactivated. I can add multiple groups in here in between. So I add the first group. So you remember how we used to create groups? We used to select some points, and here on viewport we press tab and add group to group them. But this time I'm gonna use a bounding region to group of where I want. So I add a bounding region. If I click to visibility, you see that the region is added. So that bounding region, if I click here, you can adjust. It can be used to I'm going to set it to points. So set your bounding region to points. The reason is that there's one point in the middle of your these like pieces, and that one point is driving them. So you see that group 1, let's call it inactive group. I can use the same name here on the group name as well. So what I did, I created a group and I made it to points, and I told it to be bounding region, and I used to select some region. So these parts, lower part is supposed to be inactive, isn't it? Actually, I want like kind of to hold 2 walls as well, like those 2 walls. So I add more groups, you will see. So like I copy and paste this group. Again, I use a lot of this copy and paste. And another one, and add them. Inactive group, and they've got like, so this one inactive group 1, and this one gonna be the inactive group 2. So that one is supposed to cover that one, like this wall, and that one is supposed to cover this wall. If I go, so you see that this one is kind of selected that wall. So I've got 3 groups, one for the bottom, one for this wall, one for that wall, and inside this attribute create that inactivates them, make them 0. Here I go and select them, group. I can select multiple groups. They are all selected. Now you see inside when I play, so those inactivated places don't move, and just the area that it's nice if I would have had, so like even if you create a simple Voronoi fracture, this is very dull, these pieces, isn't it? You need some internal detail. So I'm just want to give you one last point before we move to the next topic. So here you created Voronoi fracture. This is the beauty of proceduralism. I go here, I add a exploded view. This is just a viewing node. So this exploded view just kind of like explodes your pieces, so you would be able to analyze them and work. And before that, I add a detail, or what was that? Interior, RBD interior detail, that one, in the middle. Suddenly you see that, oh, some detail just added. It could be much more detail size, much like some very cool. Oh, that's a lot. And some noise amplification. So you see, that's much nicer. So I've got, so this inner part, if I bypass it, you see. Okay, so now I feed that back into my network. So I don't need that exploded view anymore. So there are some details now. If I play it, get inside. So now you see that like these pieces also like has some decent amount of detail. Okay, so that was a simple. You can hide this ball as well if you want to hit the wall without your creature showing, and use a dummy object to act on behalf of your creature, like a ball or like a box or like a whatever. You can turn the display off, or like a bullet or whatever. So save it. That was a simple wall fracturing, but in a much more controlled way. We used glue constraint. We use like different stuff. So let me open Maya. So let's say you got. I'm gonna make a new project. Save it as alien fracture. I've got this creature somewhere. I downloaded from free 3D, so there's a bunch of stuff over there. You can use them for testing. So this creature walks like very funnily. Anyway, I just want to use like, let's say, I don't know, 40 frames. I export that as Alembic cache Alembic. So let's say, let's go through the process. You modeled it, you textured it, you rigged it and animated, and you're ready to apply simulation. Okay? So you're at that stage, let's say. You go and export it as Alembic cache, export selection to Alembic cache onto my project, Houdini project, suited by fracture, imported here. So I use this folder as I told you. So alien Alembic. How many? 120? No, like 40 frames is enough for me. And export it. So it exports the Alembic cache, and now I've got the Alembic cache there, where on desktop you see like it's exported. That one. I'm gonna load it back into Houdini. So at the geoscene, call that alien. Inside that, press tab and type Alembic and load your animated creature. It should be massive, so I make it smaller. Transform of like, I don't know, still big. Yeah, and I want it to go like back here and then walks into the wall and then breaks the wall, or maybe just get closer. So I create just the last moment for you where the creature, stupid creature, walks into the wall. Pack it and add a null, name it out alien. So my alien is ready. Let's make a wall. So I created just a box, make it here I just change the size. Actually, I'd better use a transform node and I'm gonna do the same thing that I did last time, just to keep the pivot right. Okay, this is much nicer for me. I'm gonna move it forward like that. Okay, seems nice. Okay, now I'm gonna fracture the wall. I fracture it using RBD. Let's say this creature walks into a, I don't know, not a concrete but a wooden house, a Japanese wooden house. So you remember RBD fracture? So this is like kind of, so this RBD fracture, just spend some time and play around with these amazing stuff that it has here. So like the cuts are from, actually I can use a vector because I want to cut them from top. You can use like intricate details. The bounding box was nice as well, but before that I might just scale it up so it uses another, yeah, I just want it to be directing, so it uses a bounding box of your object, so I wanted them to be directly, but you can use a vector to direct that. So details, you can add some like some weight and increase weight and stuff, and clustering. So some of these will attach together. So there's chipping and stuff. So like there's a lot of intricate details here. I think I want a bit more. Anyway, just play around, get something. Grain spacing, let me lower that down maybe. Oh yeah. Okay, so it's been fractured pretty much like last time. We assemble that because before assembling I've got like 21,000 primitives. Now I've got like I have to create pack geometry. I have 245, which is the number of these pieces, and so what I can do, I can add a output node. I'm going to show you, so you understood what's happening underneath, okay? So now I'm going to create that effect with just a couple of clicks using shelf tools. So the reason that I started with the like more tedious procedure without using the tools, the amazing tools that we've got, shelf tools, because I wanted you to know what's happening underneath. Once you know that, you can get that, if any issue may rise, you can fix it. So, simple. This wall is supposed to be, where is rigid body? There it is. They're going to be RBD objects. And this alien is supposed to be deforming object, a static deforming object. It means that it's a static object, but it is moving. So that's alien. And now, so now the wall falls, but the alien pushes into it as well. But you want, so the clustering was so strong. Anyway, I will adjust it now. But I want a ground plane as well, and I don't want it to break apart until the alien arrives. So this is stupid. So what I have to do, so you remember that activation, but you will see that it just created lots of if you press L, it aligns. So lots of interesting nodes for you. It assemble here. Like that's for that goes to your fracturing. These are your constraints and stuff like that. So now I know where I can create my deactivation. I'm gonna create it right before that DOP import. I can see that this is gonna be sent into simulation. So if I create like a create attribute here, and I call it active. I don't need to, when you use shelf tools, it's a very smart way of putting things together as well, because it uses some nice procedures underneath. So just by adding one node, you don't need two and one group in the middle. So like just a default, which is one, but now, so, and a group before it, group, and that group is gonna use a points, and those points are not on the bottom, but like maybe this side. Why it's not picking up? Oh yeah, I think it's because of clustering. So I have to go, so you see that it just doesn't pick the points where I want, but it just suddenly grabs a huge bunch. It's because inside here I've got a very strong clustering. So that's why, again, you should better know the pieces, what they do. So it's the size of clustering, I make it much smaller. Let me see if that was the thing, that was the reason. Yeah, you see? Now I can grab the pieces much more wiser. I add multiple groups. So we're out of time. I have to finish it soon, but it's getting there. Another group with a region and points on the other side. You can turn on the visibility of that. So those two regions are ready. Okay, and this activation goes and grab those groups. And now everything ready. So you just have to jump back onto your auto dot network, which is like a dot network pretty much. So here, look at what it created. It created like a static object from Alien that has the deforming on it. And the constraint network, glue constraint that we used, like pretty much the same thing here, and a simple gravity and a brain. So now the creature walks, and just the moment that it hits the wall, I should have added like another group on top, should I? So let me add another group here, and that's the end of it. Oh. It's gonna be on points, and that's gonna be on top. I don't want these top part to be ripped off. So I turn off the visibility of Alien and the wall because I want them to be just visible inside here. Okay, cool. Now I've got my simulation. So like it walks into the wall, and the moment it hits the wall, maybe let me set it to it breaks it. But actually you can make it much more accurate. Oh, I didn't load the top group. My bad, sorry. Just go to the box. Here in the attribute create, say that go and grab the third group as well. Here, I've got it. And now it just walks in and just breaks the pieces that I want. Okay, if you see that the pieces just get into the ground, just you can grab the ground and move it slightly down to avoid that problem, or adjust the level of or size and the details. Anyway, so that was just like a much more controlled way of dealing with your destruction effect.